Popular culture portrays the polygraph as an infallible scientific instrument. We are told it is a precise lie detector deployed by elite security agencies to read the hidden physiological truths a suspect tries to conceal. The empirical reality is entirely different. The machine itself is a psychological interrogation prop. It relies entirely on fear, manufactured stress, and the subject's belief in its power. For over a decade, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police utilized this exact tool, the pre-employment polygraph, or PEP, as the inescapable gatekeeper for all its security clearances. Every single recruit had to sit in the chair. The RCMP marketed the PEP to applicants as an objective truth verifier, yet internal contractor protocols and training manuals prove it was designed to ferret out previously undisclosed information. Its purpose was to extract confessions through psychological manipulation. The polygraph cannot measure deception. It only measures physiological arousal. Relying on arousal as a proxy for truth creates a catastrophic security vulnerability, one easily exploited by anyone who understands the machine's absolute limitations. By analyzing internal RCMP testing protocols, historical hiring standards, and recent high-profile scandals, we can completely deconstruct the polygraph illusion. First, we have to look at the subjective manipulation tactics examiners deploy to fail honest, naive applicants. Second, we will examine the exact mechanism active, corrupt actors use to bypass the entire system simply by refusing to confess. Third, we will map out the specific mathematical mental countermeasures required to reliably defeat the machine's biological sensors. Understanding this protocol exposes a much larger reality about institutional security. When an agency relies on pseudoscience for vetting, systemic corruption inevitably follows. The RCMP has a long, documented history of conflating involuntary physiological responses with guilt. The polygraph is part of a much older pattern of behavior. Throughout the 1950s and 60s, the RCMP utilized a vetting tool known as the fruit machine. It resembled a dentist's chair equipped with a pulley-mounted camera aimed directly at the applicant's pupils. The underlying scientific assumption was that showing subjects specific imagery would cause involuntary pupil dilation. The RCMP believed this biological reaction could successfully detect homosexuality, which they viewed as a security risk. They targeted hundreds of employees using this method. In 1960, a respected Canadian diplomat named John Wendell Holmes was subjected to this exact pseudoscientific interrogation, interrogated until he confessed, and quietly removed from public service. The polygraph operates on the exact same logic. It is a modern biological parlor trick that substitutes actual investigative rigor with faulty assumptions about how the human body reacts to stress. The modern protocol utilized by the RCMP was the directed lie screening test. The sensors strapped to an applicant only track three things: respiration, perspiration, and cardiovascular activity. They do not track truth. To manufacture a baseline of stress, the examiner uses the reverse control technique. They push plausible casual scenarios on the applicant through an endless loop of sub-questions. By framing illicit activities as normal, the examiner attempts to confuse the applicant into admitting a minor detail, which is then twisted into a major violation. This data visualization shows the gap between the machine's marketed accuracy and its actual recorded output. To convince the applicant the machine works flawlessly, examiners use a double verification test. They perform a rigged card trick using a specially manufactured deck to guess the applicant's card. It is a theatrical performance to ensure the subject believes the sensors are omnipotent. If the applicant denies wrongdoing, the post-test interrogation begins. The examiner utilizes periods of forced silence. They bluff, claiming the charts show deception. They use coercive statements, pretending the interview is voluntary, while quietly noting that the applicant's attitude might cost them the job. The entire procedure is a subjective mind game. The objective is to secure a verbal confession. If the applicant holds their ground and does not speak, the machine is completely powerless. The ultimate vulnerability of this system is exposed when a truly malicious actor simply stays calm and refuses to offer a confession. Consider the timeline of RCMP officer Shangio. He sat for his pre-employment polygraph shortly before joining the Richmond detachment in 2016. He passed the exam completely undetected. Years later, Shangio was suspended and charged with 34 counts of voyeurism and sexual assault. Ottawa police allege those offenses occurred between 2011 and 2018. The polygraph failed to detect years of severe, ongoing criminal behavior that predated his hiring. The rot extended to the administrators of the tests themselves. Sergeant Donald Ray was the officer in charge of the polygraph unit at the RCMP's Behavioral Sciences Unit. Over several years, Ray hosted after-hours parties, exposed himself to colleagues, and regularly booked the polygraph suite for lunchtime sex with a subordinate. Ray's behavior was a symptom of a broader, systemic culture of harassment within the RCMP, a reality brought to the public's attention by veterans like Corporal Catherine Galliford, who stepped forward to expose the toxicity. The Shangio and Ray cases provide the definitive proof. When an organization replaces rigorous, objective security vetting with a subjective suitability prop, institutional failure is guaranteed. Because the machine cannot read minds, it relies on reading arousal relative to a baseline. Therefore, the test can be mathematically defeated by a subject who actively regulates that baseline. This chart shows the principle of internal modulation. Trained individuals apply specific hidden cognitive loads to manipulate their cardiovascular and respiratory responses on command, flattening the data the examiner relies on. The first technique requires spiking the baseline. During the mundane control questions, the subject intentionally thinks of a highly stressful or traumatic event, or performs a covert physical action. This artificially inflates the machine's baseline reading to a massive degree. The second technique requires depressing the reaction. When the examiner asks the critical relevant questions about drug use or security breaches, the subject actively controls their breathing and visualizes a relaxing scenario. Compared to the massive manufactured stress spikes of the control questions, their actual lie registers as a tiny, insignificant ripple. If the examiner suspects manipulation, they will transition to the post-test interrogation bluff. The golden rule for surviving this phase is absolute discipline. Admit nothing, deny everything. The polygrapher's threats hold zero administrative weight without a verbal admission. Through strict mental discipline and a precise understanding of the machine's limitations, the polygraph is rendered mathematically and functionally useless. Faced with overwhelming evidence of the test's failure to stop active threats and battered by internal scandals, the organization had to pivot. As of summer 2022, the RCMP officially removed the pre-employment polygraph from its recruitment process. Officially, the agency cited the need to modernize the applicant evaluation process and reduce hiring bottlenecks at their training academy. Unspoken was the stark reality that the machine failed to detect malicious actors while punishing honest applicants who fell into psychological traps. The removal of the test serves as a quiet institutional admission. Physiological parlor tricks have no utility in modern intelligence and security. For nearly 2 decades, applicants navigated a wilderness of mirrors, a system that operated entirely on fear, naivete, and compliance, rather than empirical science. True security cannot be outsourced to a machine. It requires rigorous, objective, and evidence-based human investigation. If you found this breakdown valuable, leave a like and subscribe. Keep questioning the systems of authority around you, and we will see you in the next investigation.